That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Trade Talk. This time we are starting on a wonderful journey through Grant Morrison's Justice League run. The last episode of Trade Talk I did before this one was on Grant Morrison's Multiversity, and I love me some Grant Morrison. I've been wanting to reread this run for a while, and so I figured now would be the best time. So, for my money, Grant Morrison has the best Justice League run in history. Thanks, that's the end of the review. That's the end of the entire series. We're done. Goodbye. Alright, see ya. Future Ian, why aren't you putting the outro with the awesome comic book? What's going on? Why am I still on camera? Do I actually have to talk about why this is genius? No, come on, man. People know to just go buy it. It's Grant Morrison. It's Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and Aquaman. Why wouldn't they be buying it? Why don't they all already own a copy and have it in their hands? Come on, this is ridiculous. In all seriousness, folks, seriously, you don't need me to tell you why this is good. The roster, the writer, the 90s craziness. It's great. Trust me. But, fine. I'll talk about Grant Morrison's Justice League. So, to get why Grant Morrison's Justice League is so good, I feel like you've got to take a step back and remember the timing of when it came out. Because for a long time before this, the Justice League was not the Seven. Like, when you think Justice League, you think of the characters that were in the movie. You think of the characters in the television series. There's always that, one or two members that pop in and out, but you think of the core team. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman. They're all there, right? That hadn't been the case for a really long time. The Justice League was a bunch of C and D string characters that no one outside of the comics community would really know. And the philosophy at DC at the time was, we don't want the big name characters. They have their own adventures going on. They don't need more stuff. No one wants to read a team book that's going to distract from those characters' run. No. People would love to read a great Justice League team book. That's kind of the point. That's what made Justice League so cool in the first place when it initially came out. Was, oh my god, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, and Aquaman, and Martian Manhunter are on a team together. How could anyone ever beat them? Well, can you imagine the threats that team has to take on? So just the world of Justice League, to bring the original roster back, was for some reason controversial. Grant Morrison actually had to argue with people that this was going to be a good idea. And you can kind of see that coming through in the beginning. You have the old team moving out of headquarters, and Metamorpho, Ice, and I don't even know who this guy is. I barely know Ice. Metamorpho I do actually know. Who the fuck the redhead even is? God damn. I have no idea. How did we miss it? Freaking thing came out of nowhere. We're talking major camouflage here. We got anyone with a file with that kind of tech? I'll check. I don't know why I'm doing this, Al. I thought we only came up here to start clearing out our stuff so the A-team can move in. Yeah, just sneeze. Yeah, just the size of some of the egos soon to be clashing in the Justice League refuge near you. Metamorpho's kind of embodying the sentiment from DC at the time. It's like, all these big personalities, you can't really write a book and write them all well anyway. So it's really a great move. And this should have been the Justice League movie. Look how thin this is. It's ridiculously thin. This should have been the fucking movie. It's just a really, really solid story. So we have kind of what a lot of people think when they think of DC as the gods of the superhero world and the Justice League as the gods of the superhero world. Why don't they just solve all of the world's problems? And so that's kind of the premise, is we have an alien team of superheroes arrive on Earth. They call themselves the Hyper Clan, and they say, I am Protex, we are the Hyper Clan, we've come to save the world. And we just get this immediate barrage of news information that kind of like tells us what they're doing in such a short span of time. Within only a day of their bombshell arrival, the HyperClan heroes have already produced their first bona fide miracle. It began in the skies over the Sahara Desert, where Protex, Pyramid, and Armech created their own cloud factory using chilled air and pulse electrical discharges. Then, as the eyes of the world watched, Centurion and Immortal ferried in thousands of tons of fertile topsoil gathered from the ocean bed and from under the South Polar ice fields. While Superfast Zum, together with Tronix and the space-charging Fluxus, set to work seeding what was, until today, the world's most famous wasteland. In a single day, the alien Samaritans have succeeded in turning hell into heaven, creating lush gardens where not so long ago nothing could hope to grow. A rainstorm loaded with honey and wine provided a celebratory climax to the day's events, and one look at the faces of these local children summed up the feeling. So they solved world hunger in a day. Best superheroes ever, right? And the Justice League is of course really not okay with this. Superman brings deserts can't just be fixed. There are causes and consequences, social and environmental factors. The Sahara is green today, but can it be sustained, or are people being given false hopes in the name of spectacle? It's a really good point. Yeah, Superman could rush things and nutrients into the desert, but Earth's deserts exist for a very specific geological reason, for shit I'm not going to get into, but the climate has decided naturally for that place to be a desert because rain doesn't fucking fall there. So unless Superman plans to rush by there every single time they need rain, you can't solve a desert. And so he brings this up, but the people are so in awe of Centurion and the Hyper Clan that they don't care to hear it. So the Justice League start to look into this and wonder what's going on. But before they get the chance, it looks like the Hyper Clan has taken matters a bit further and has started to execute criminals. So that's a pretty intense escalation. And before the Justice League gets a chance to do anything about it, some mysterious astronauts destroy their orbital tower. We get a pretty cool scene with Kyle. It was the 90s, folks. It was the 90s. The 90s. You can't argue with it. It was the 90s. Look at that. There's a T-Rex. A robot T-Rex attacking a robot astronaut. It was the 90s, folks. But anyway, their satellite is taken out, and so the Justice League's kind of, on their having to think on the fly, work on the fly, and deal with space combat and try to salvage the Justice League, Watchtower, all that stuff. Meanwhile, Centurion is working on something with other members of the Hyper Clan, and they are raising an ancient city. Behold the glory of Zanzor. So clearly, something's the fuck up here. But the Justice League is able to band back together and reunite in a Earth base that is actually secretive, and Batman shows up. Aquaman hasn't responded. We're still waiting for Batman. No surprises there. I'm here. I've been here for an hour. Didn't think I'd make it, but Gotham's been quiet. Let me just say, Grant Morrison writes my favorite Batman, but Howard Porter does a great job drawing Batman, especially 90s Batman is my crack, guys. So Grant Morrison just writes these little moments for Batman that are, like, so good. Superman, strange. I didn't hear your heartbeat. Gadget worked. I love that. That's beautiful. That he's just got a gadget that he's carrying around with him to suppress Superman's superhearing his own heartbeat. I love it. But anyway, Howard Porter draws such a cool fucking Batman. I love this panel up here. It's just like this fucking Nosferatu creeper living shadow shit. And the fucking shouldery spikes. The shouldery spikes are beautiful. Buy this book! just what are you doing listening to me? How haven't you bought this book yet? But anyway, Batman reveals that there are high-energy microwave frequencies being broadcast from outer space, and this can only be one thing. Mind control. The masses are being brainwashed to love the HyperClan and hate the Justice League. Batman says, this is a planned invasion. We're facing an unknown, immensely powerful enemy. We don't know how many there are, and we don't know what they want. First blood goes to them, but now it's our turn. My suggestion is this. We make plans, we move fast, and we hit hard. This is war. I love it. So the HyperClan has erected these massive structures seemingly out of nowhere in the blink of an eye, while the Justice League tries to figure out what's going on with them. Martian Manhunter disappears briefly, and Justice League decides to just go fucking destroy the things because this is war, it's time to fight. Harper draws pretty good 90s Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's not my favorite thing in the 90s as far as art I've seen of her back then, but that's not bad. It's a pretty cool splash image of her. I like it. Or that's not a splash image, but you know what I mean. So anyway, there's a fight. Aquaman shows up. This, of course, when, Peter David was writing Aquaman, best Aquaman ever with the missing hand. And, however, he is not enough, and their clashing personalities get them both kicked to shit, and they are defeated. Flash and Green Lantern go to destroy a city, but Flash is immediately taken out or distracted by the super speedster of their team, Zum. Z-U-M. I quite like that because it sounds like Zoom. It feels fast and stuff, but it's a completely unique name. So he has to deal with the super speedster, and Green Lantern has to deal with another one of them. Meanwhile, we see Martian Manhunter meeting with one of the aliens. So there's some kind of creepiness. And Superman and Batman are on their way to the Arctic when they are attacked. Superman is taken out almost instantly, and Batman's plane is shot down. Superman awakens on the ground to find that the aliens are there with some kryptonite, and Batman's plane is crashed. As the one that crashed Batman's plane comes up to talk to the leader, he says, "Shouldn't I check for Batman's body? Best not risk the flames. If he survived the crash, the cold will finish him. He's only human after all. We have what we want here." And so, the Justice League has been, it seems, defeated. Except for Green Lantern and Flash, but that comes later. Though we do get just a gorgeous scene. In the next issue, Batman is alive, because he's Batman. And he's able to sneak into the alien base. Then we get back to Flash versus Zum. And this is where Grant Morrison does some of the best Flash lore creation ever, where he realizes that Zum is using super speed in a really clever manner, and so he's going to have to come up with something in order to beat him. So Wally West races around the world, approaching light speed, at which point relativistic effects take over as a body approaches light speed. Visual input will begin to blue shift, and my body's mass will increase towards infinity. At these speeds, I'll appear to him as a continuous beam of light. I could hit him 1,000 times before he had a chance to blink. Once ought to do it. Maybe he is as tough as the Man of Steel, but packing the mass I mentioned, I'm sure he felt that. And we just get this beautiful image of this dumb guy getting hit once with infinite mass, the infinite mass punch. And because Science with Kyle Hill did a whole episode just on this one page, or these 2 pages, it's legit. Like, if you could travel at light speed, you could hit someone, and your punch would basically have the mass of, and just have an infinite amount of mass behind it, because you'd be traveling at light speed. The numbers are astronomical, literally. So I love that. That's genius. Grant Morrison ahead of everybody. But as he and Kyle go to take on this city, they're unfortunately tricked and duped and caught again. And so the whole Justice League has been defeated, except for Batman, who's now hiding in the rafters of this place. And so the aliens have sent out a party to look for him after one of their party didn't come back, and they find the dude hanging, the batarang in his chest, and says, "I know your secret." So they all look for Batman, and they eventually find him in this ring, and he reveals the big mystery that's been driving this whole book. So they're like, "Got any last words?" as they surround him, and he goes, "1 or 2. Super strength, flight, invulnerability, shape-changing, mind control. You're Martians, aren't you? And when you brought down my aircraft, you didn't dare search the wreckage because of the one thing which robs your people of their powers. Fire." He holds up a matchbook. That's a very interesting theory. Are you really going to try to stop us with one tiny flame? You can't harm us with that. Maybe you're right. He throws the match and ignites a circle of fire around them, depowering the Martians. And it's so epic. He cuts back to the villain, Protex. "Thronx, Fluxus, what's happening there, Centurion? He's only one man." You just have Superman, "The most dangerous man on Earth. Your plans are falling apart." I love that. I love that so much. Superman, the entire Justice League completely defeated. Who's the one they overlook? Because he's just a man. Batman. And he comes through and Batman fucking saves the Justice League. Oh, it's so good. It's so fucking good. I love it so much. So yeah, it's the White Martians have come to conquer Earth, to try to make humanity their slaves. And the Justice League end up overcoming them and stopping it. Superman's actually able to piece together, now that they're Martians, that they don't actually have kryptonite. They just put the mental image in his head and gave him psychosomatic kryptonite poisoning. Grant Morrison's a fucking genius. Just the idea of kryptonite can completely overcome Superman. And then, the whole thing with Martian Manhunter, he'd figured out their plans long ago, and so he'd taken one of their forms to hide amongst them, act as a spy, and ultimately help save the Justice League too. And yeah, so the Justice League gets out and saves the day. And that's basically the rest of it. I really love this book, though. It's so good. There's so much. This whole last of this section of this book is just epic ass fights. Superman fights a Martian in the center of the Earth. Wonder Woman's fighting a Martian out in space. It's just cool as shit. And I just love the way that this goes. And the Justice League really importantly, I think this is brilliant. The Justice League not only defeat the aliens, but they help humanity defeat the invasion. Because, like, the Justice League only takes out one team of white Martians, but there's still a whole fleet invading from the sky. And so the Justice League broadcasts to humanity what they are and how to fight them. So you have this story at the beginning of the book with people cheering and being so happy that there are saviors here from the stars to solve all of the world's problems for them, mirrored by the end of the story with the Justice League giving people the means to save themselves. That's really, really smart writing. And before anyone gets to, conservative philosophy, that's not conservative philosophy. That is empowerment, and that's really, really great. There's a difference. Like, Superman doesn't shout at you as you're about to get hit by a bus how to get out of the way. There's a difference between these things. This is a really, really smartly, thematically written book that pays off in a pretty good way, and it's all wrapped up in just one of the coolest Justice League stories imaginable, where everything just works out in the end. I love the scene between Batman and Green Lantern, where he's dragging in all the Martians he defeated. 3 minutes, 15 seconds. Like, they're talking about holding their breath. And Green Lantern goes, "Only 4 of them, Batman? You're slowing down." I like that. That's pretty good. So yeah, they've defeated the Martians. They helped humanity stop the invasion. They've saved the day, and in the middle of it all, they built themselves at the end of it all, they built themselves a new watchtower base on the moon, looking up at the Earth. I really like that as they strive to protect it. But there's an epilogue wherein a guy has dreams and thoughts he can't understand because he's a Martian locked in a form. I don't think that ever pays off. As far as I'm aware, I may be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, that story beat never gets paid off. I might be not fully remembering later parts of Grant Morrison's Justice League run, but I don't think that ever goes anywhere, which is too bad. It's a really brilliant story beat. But I could be wrong. If anyone knows the story that's picked up in, let me know in the comments. I'd love to give that a read. Also, speaking of Grant Morrison's later run, there's this moment here that, like, I didn't even remember, where the Martians are talking with Superman and telling him things about themselves. And I want to find the moment. I'm pretty sure it's while Superman's fighting the Martian in the center of the Earth. But it actually comes back and pays off in a really interesting way later on in Grant Morrison's Justice League run here. So I'll make sure to mention that again whenever I get to that volume. It might be the conclusion of his run, so that would be very Grant Morrison to set it up at the end, set it up at the beginning, and pay it off at the end kind of thing. That's very Grant Morrison. I'm looking at all of Protex's dialogue balloons. I like the little touches they put in here, that everyone's got really unique dialogue balloons, but all the Martians have kind of this squiggly line, including John Jones. Okay, yeah, here we go. This is Protex, the leader of the White Martians, speaking. Long before there was human life, we journeyed to this planet. Earth creatures were primitive and easy to manipulate, but unfortunately, our interventions provoked a biological catastrophe. Earth was to have been the cradle of a superhuman race, but we snapped one too many DNA chains, and the creatures that should have been gods ended up just humans. And, spoilers for future stuff, but there's a point at which, in Grant Morrison's run, at which humanity gets super evolved, and they get their superpowers that all of humanity was meant to have back. which is pretty smart when like you think about the DC universe as a whole. There's a lot of races that just have superpowers, like Lobo and Kryptonians, depending on what planet they're on, and Martians. Why didn't Earth get that shake? And it turns out they were meant to, but the white Martians fucked it up. That's really clever. I really like that. And so we get that payoff later where humanity gets the power that it was always meant to have back. Such a good book. So much love for Grant Morrison's Justice League. Can never get enough of it, and I cannot recommend it enough to you guys. The 90s art, throughout the entirety of the series, gets really kind of crazy. I mean, you got Mullet Superman, and just kind of weird wackiness, like as they're first figuring out how to do a lot of visual effects on in post with computers and stuff. But you know, I gotta dig it still. There's some 90s art that I just can't get enough of, and like Shadow Creature Batman is definitely one of those things. So this has its moments, if nothing else. Let me put it that way. Like Batman just looks really good in here. That's sex. That is just sex right there. All right. I think that'll do it for this episode of Trade Talk. As I've said, if you can't tell, I love this book. I could not get enough of this book. Justice League, Grant Morrison. It's beautiful. All right, everyone. Till next time. Bye.
That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.